So as Vlad said, well, first of all, Vlad, thank you for having me here. Don't know how you got fed up with listening to me already. So I'm going to be speaking about who we are, what we do at Kalea, but then mainly I'm going to go through a very practical example of something we encountered very recently in a gaming project. And then, to be honest, I would love to have an open discussion with you guys and debate a bit. I think just me talking for 30 minutes or 40 minutes is fucking boring. And I might lose my voice too. So, who are we? Who am I? So, I'm right now the founder of Kalea, okay? And the core thing that we have to have in mind is that when we talk about tokenomics, is that the sole purpose to have a token is to incentivize or disincentivize desired or undesired user behavior. Anything that falls out of that is just noise around the token, okay? A great example is actually Bitcoin. Very simple, but Bitcoin only has to incentivize the miners. Being hedged against inflation, a store of value, and so on, is a byproduct of this incentivization process. So, how do we do all of this, or what do we do at Kalea? At Kalea, we essentially help projects tokenomics, mechanism design, and we do all of this through our own software that we developed, which essentially allows us to build a replicas of the protocol, a digital twin, then run simulations to see what breaks, how it breaks, why it breaks, and so on, and then optimize throughout the process. So, yeah, this is what I mentioned about the software. And essentially, as I said, the digital twin is a virtual replica, one-to-one scale. So, replicating all of this, all the mechanisms, what is happening, for instance, game dynamics. What happens if you have a game dynamic where you're giving 5 points to the users, and then suddenly from one day to another you have a 10x increase in your users? How is that going to affect your game dynamics? What happens if you have a defect protocol and then suddenly your presence-to-realization ratio is not well adjusted, and then you start seeing mass liquidations when it shouldn't be happening just because there was a small event, right? So being able to test all of this in a virtual free environment certainly saves a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of pain in the future. So this is a bit the process that we follow at Kalea. So we're launching very soon now an AI agent to test your tokenomics, usual phase. So first part is the discovery. Then what's very important here is actually the first 2 stages, I'd say, even more than what we do with our software. So understanding the business, what are the objectives in the long, medium, short term, and what is that we want to achieve. This is the core, and to be able to design something that actually lasts and makes sense. If you start from, hey, we want the token to do this, and then your business model is to the other side, it's going to end up costing more time and money than what it actually brings to the table. Okay. So, a little bit into gaming, more specific, okay? So, in gaming, there's essentially 2 things to consider. The models of the game, then the design mechanisms within these mechanisms, and how they're going to be interacting, how they're going to be affecting, and how is the individuals going to be then using all of this. Does it make sense to add X, Y, Z, or doesn't it? And a lot of times, as founders, we tend to overcomplicate things sometimes, and this happens to me, and probably happens to a lot of you guys, that we get very focused on one thing, trying to get it perfect, and we forget to find a quick product market fit, or get too carried away in a very cool dynamic that then no one uses, no one cares. So, as I was mentioning, right, at the end of the day we need to look at what we want to see and what the mechanism that we have in hand, and then how is that aligning with the behavior I just mentioned in my head. It's like, are you familiar with game theory? Yes, everything is based on game theory in this area. Game theory, person's dilemma, and then some extra sprinkles of magic, and you get something that works. So, what are the tools, right? So at the end of the day, in a game, you're going to have in-game dynamics, and then Web3 dynamics, essentially tokens, NFTs. That's it. And then how are you going to align with that the users, depending on the game, right? But again, not 2 games work the same. And we see a lot of people come to us and say like, hey, XYZ did this in their tokenomics and it worked amazingly, we're just going to replicate it. Like, yeah, but you're an RPG game, you're an MMO, They launched 3 years ago, you're launching today, completely different scenarios. You cannot focus what you're doing just solely on this. Okay, so things to take into account, right? Supply and demand, sustainability. So one of the core things to take into account is inflation in games economies. Game economies tend to over-distribute rewards to users, tend to overdo it, not monitor how then this is having an impact throughout the dynamics, and then has a very, very negative impact on the overall situation. And there's tools to safeguard this. Into burn of token, and then they said like if you have the correct monitoring tools, you can stop situations before they happen. But still see quite a lack of them, right? Build the game, launch it, launch the token, hopefully it goes well, and if it doesn't, then it might, we see what happens, and then the people just don't care, right? So this is actually kind of important part. Okay? So a lot of players are here for the same thing. We're gonna have players actually playing, we're gonna have people just farming in the ecosystem. We're gonna have people that are just casual, like peeking around, seeing what is going on, and so on. So when you're designing a token, you have to take this into account as well. Because if you have some mechanism that allows people to farm, they are going to farm it. And if they can dump your token, they will dump your token. And you have to assume always the worst, because they will kind of do it. So, how do we solve this? Okay, let's map the users, see what they want, what are the different stakeholders in the process, how are they going to be participating in our specific dynamics, and then having this type of users a very clear path. Okay, we have the PC, we have the casual user, the hardcore user, we have the farmer, so on and so on. Then how can we create the specific dynamics or safeguards to avoid or incentivize what we want? As a gaming projects, I think we all agree that what the number one thing that we want is people to play more hours a day and to have more users play. So overall hours a day played is the core metric for pretty much any game. Saying that for DeFi it might be the TVL, right? So how can we achieve this and avoid the extraction of value and allow this to persist in time? Because if not, you can have a very large peak at the beginning, a lot of users playing because they're farming, so they're not really playing, they're just extracting value from your ecosystem. And then once that is done, that's it. Go back to your game or to your user base, and then the real players that are enjoying the game and so on are left in a bad situation. I'm just going to use another word for it. So, as I said before, we have to always think on what's the worst thing that can happen, right? And then some risks to also consider. The other day, as I was saying, right, we have the farmers, there's a lot of speculation going on. There's a lot of now bots joining, mainly for Telegram games, and then obviously the legal regulatory compliance when you're launching to all the gaming. So that is changing very quickly in the scope. So we need to take that into account and be very careful. But now to the part that I really wanted to get into. There's a little case study. So this is actually from someone we're working with right now. And yeah, I changed a bit some of the stuff, not to disclose who they are. But essentially, they came to us with Tokenomics that had a series of parameters. And what we're going to go through is first, okay, what are the parameters? How are rewards going to be distributed? Okay, this is very specific on converting those points that players are accruing to tokens eventually. How are players going to be growing, and then how are we starting this to see what the different dynamics can look like. Okay. So to give a bit of context, essentially there's certain activities in the game, for instance quests, dungeons, each one take a different time and award different points to the user for completing it. Okay. So we have that on one hand, then we have the chests that also give points. Then to give you an example of this example, I just reduced it to fighting referring friends. Okay? So at the end of the day, a dungeon takes about 40 minutes to complete. Quest was about 15-20 minutes, and then obviously you want them to invite other friends. Because we said the KPI, the objective is to get maximum hours played per day in total, right? Through all the users. So if we have more users that play more, the better. So having all of this, the core team wanted to go for a fixed conversion rate, actually. So they wanted to go for like 2,000 points accrued by a user will convert to 100 tokens. That's it. Very straightforward, very simple, simple to implement, simple to understand. But then a lot of red flags start appearing. Okay, so as I said before, what happens is we suddenly get 10,000 users, and from one day to another, 100,000 or a million. So the very simplified version of like the flow mechanics behind it. So first of all, what we did is, okay, let's divide into the different player types with their historical data. So casual, occasional, regular, hardcore players. Then the quest, dungeons, and chests. Inviting people awarded solely 2 points that it wasn't necessary for this example. And what we're going to be focusing on is the token mechanism on how do we convert the points to tokens to ensure that we're not extracting value from the ecosystem and we're actually incentivizing the people, but then trying to add that value. Okay? So first thing that we did, all of this took 3 years of the simulations. We first ran players. Okay, we ran the simulation, we ran the players, how many points. First, how are the players growing throughout the time. And here what we do, because we cannot predict the future, we run a full spectrum between essentially negative growth to very high growth rates, even so realistic in some cases, and we'll run every single scenario in between, so we cannot predict the future. So if it sustains in overall, in general, and yields good results in general, then it should be pretty resilient once we go live. So we run the simulations. For example, there was 5,000 simulations. You started between 250 to 400 users in the starting point, depending on the simulation as well. And we ran all of this, okay? Then, here you can see a bit the changes between the actual hardcore, regular, casual, and occasional players, how many points per day they were generating in the simulations, okay? This is just the average for all of them. There would be like 5,009 for each one. And it would get quite messy. And then from there, we also simulated token price. As I said, we cannot predict the future. We normally do far more simulations for token price as well. In this case, we kept it very simple: 40% growth rate, 35% volatility, which is kind of standard crypto volatility. And looking there to people who works at DeFi, yeah, he agrees. So we did this, but then you'll see why we did the price of the token. So this is the token point conversion rate. Okay. So here we have the 3 mechanisms that we're testing out. So the green line, okay, is the fixed rate that they were saying. For every 2,000 points you accrue, you get 100 tokens. That's it, simple. Then mechanism B is a fixed inflation, okay, based on circulating supply. So you say, for instance, 15%, in this example, it's actually 15% inflation. So based on your circulating supply at day 1, you do 15% for that year, then based on the circulating supply at the end of the year, so day 1 of year 2, you do another 15% and so on. And then mechanism C is a typical linear vesting that we all see. So I'm going to be giving rewards to my community for 36 months linear. Okay, so you can see here already how different mechanisms are rewarding different points. So this is the conversion rate, tokens per point. So up here for the 2000 to 100, and then mechanism C, the linear, is up here, and then the lowest is actually the fixed inflation. How does this translate to the system? Okay? So this is the token supply. This is what would happen based on the user growth rates that we simulated. If we have a fixed conversion rate, we can see that the average is substantially higher than the other two. And then in the highest scenario, it would actually go parabolic. So, and this that's at the end of the inflation rate. And then you can see how the difference goes between inflation and mechanisms. So, this is why we calculated the price. So using the same prices model for token price for the two scenarios, you can see how much money you would essentially be giving out with the linear versus the other two mechanisms. And here are the stats. So with mechanism A, linear, it would have cost the team about 60 million on average in rewards, versus mechanism B with the fixed annual inflation, it's just under 600K, and then mechanism C was very close by with 639K. And inflation rates, you can see, with Mechanism 28 is 1,283%. So, in reality, this is just because we did a GPM of the price. When we plug this into our model, that takes all of this into account with the inflation, token would actually have crashed substantially. And it would be one of those tokens that look like a cliff, down 99% in a very short period of time, and then it never recovers. So, this is something very important to take into account. And I wanted to talk about this today, essentially, because we're seeing a lot of projects now coming to us. Very short vestings, no lockups. When it comes to rewards, it's like, yeah, I'm going to distribute 20% of my rewards in 12 months. It's like it doesn't seem like you realize what the project is going to be, the problem that it's going to cause to the project in a very short period of time. So this is why I wanted to talk about this, and essentially I'm willing to know what you guys think and have an open discussion about it.
How do you calculate the buy pressure versus sell pressure on other conditions on decentralized exchanges or centralized exchanges? Because there is a difference in the liquidity distribution.
So the way we calculate in our software the buying and selling pressure, we have a full replica of Uniswap, and we just utilize that in general. Doesn't matter the decentralized, centralized exchange. If you're in a centralized exchange, you would have a market maker normally providing the liquidity. So long as you have a market maker, you're going to be better off actually in the centralized exchange than in the decentralized exchange. So long as it's a good market maker. It's a factor to take into account. And how we calculate it? So we have a full replica of Uniswap, and then we take into account, okay, we run tests. So you're not predicting the future, but what happens if 100% of my holders sell 1% of their token holdings, 2%, 3%, 4%, so on, until we get to 100% for every single environmental condition scenario that we have. So on average, when we run the full simulations for any project, we do all the simulations, we generate about a terabyte. So we cannot predict the future, then even 99% of those simulations, your token is pretty, the X set of parameters are yielding best results, then you should be pretty safe once you go to market.
How many projects do you have in your portfolio?
Right now we have 19?
21.
She knows.
Just I don't know if you talked about the staking program. Is that something that you're taking in consideration into your Tokenomics?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we look at base when we start doing this. I kept this very simple for presentation's sake.
Yeah.
We normally start at 200 parameters and then start going from there, including obviously staking, liquidity provisions. So, what happens if you provide liquidity on day 200? What happens if you're over distributing rewards to stakers? What happens if staking goes to zero? Like if no one is staking, or if it's too high.
And the staking, I mean, there's plenty of way of staking. Is it something where you're giving recommendation, or is it?
Sorry?
The staking, is it something that you're giving recommendation for? Or is it something that your clients coming with and saying that's our staking program and give us?
We give recommendations and everything, but then the way our software works is a CAD, a complex automated design software. So we build custom replicas for your project. So if you have a specific staking policy that you want to implement, then maybe we consider that there might be a better option. Besides telling you and having a discussion, we'll run simulations, A/B test both against the same conditions, and then we can see what happens, similar to what we did here. So, but with the full, obviously taking into account the rest of the mechanics, which is very important, because if you're giving away a lot, but then you have a very strong buyback policy, then it should be, or could balance out, right? Or having, for instance, dynamic buybacks, which we're starting to see now more and more. But instead of having that fixed, I'm going to buy back 25% of my revenue, and that's it.
And regarding your track record, you said that you've got more than 90 projects. What's,
21.
21, sorry. 21 projects. What's the result? How fresh is the company?
Sorry?
How fresh is your company?
We're 3 years old now.
3 years.
Yeah. And just turned 3 in May.
So the 21 projects are already results, I guess?
Sorry?
The 21 projects are results already?
Are?
They got results already?
Yeah, some of them yes, others are PGing now, very soon. So yeah, I can send you later on a case study if you want. We don't try to predict the future, but we're actually pretty surprised on how close we were. So quite happy on that. But we don't try to predict the future. Big disclaimer. If I could, I would guarantee you guys I would be probably in the Bahamas in the mountains right now with a pina colada and just enjoying the sun. Not with this like computer screen tan I have. So yeah. More questions?
From all the projects you worked in with, how many are of TG right now?
How many are post TG? Right now we have a few, 5, so.
And predictions versus reality?
No, it's pretty close. We're pretty close. That's why we were not trying to predict the future. It's about 16% off, but it does be off on the upside, not on the downside. So I prefer being off on the upside than the downside. It's a nice happiness to that. Yeah. So, any other questions? Any other concerns? So, just to know, how many of you here are launching a game or working on a gaming project? And what is the greatest concern you have with your project right now? If you're launching a token. What's your greatest concern? Your greatest fear? If you're integrating a token when it comes to this?
Dumping the reward on the market.
Sorry?
Dumping the reward
On the market.
the market is a concern.
So, what safeguards have you integrated into your system to avoid this?
The suppress rewards.
The regulations for both.
Yeah.
The regulations.
Regulations?
Yeah.
As in legal regulations? Or where you're launching?
Because it will change in the future, you know.
Yeah, but where are you launching from? Where are you launching from? I'm not too sure how legislation is there, but they go to a more crypto-friendly country.
I don't like this guy. This is my field. It's subjective.
Okay, guys. So, there's no more questions. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here.